Okay.
Anyway, you could
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. I'm just gonna move this up.
It also says that one of the ways it's not like that. And also it's just like you did the
All right, guys, are you ready? Okay. So, is everybody ready to travel? Because that's what we're going to do today. Put on your seatbelts, and we're literally going to be traveling. Not just in the words of Torah, but behind the words of Torah. And the reason why I'm saying the travels, because that's actually the name of this week's Parsha is Masei. And if you're wondering what this is actually like an online situation also going on.
Oh,
so yeah.
So here are questions. Just as long as the camera doesn't turn around.
No, it's not. Don't worry.
They see you.
What's going on here? Okay. Okay. Anyways, so what we're going to talk about is so I'll just tell you. Usually the class it's called Experience Zohar. We usually take a small portion of Zohar, and we delve into it. We actually bring out practical lessons. This week, actually, there's no Zohar in this week's Parsha. Very interestingly, I'm not sure why. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exploring a section from the Alter Rebbe in a book called the Kutei Torah, the Baal HaTanya, on the Parsha, basically something that relates to all of our lives, which is travels. So what are travels all about, right? Right now, I mean, the U.S., Europe put a whole travel ban during the week of travels, right? Interestingly. And we're actually more restricted this week than I think ever in Israel from traveling. You know, people are feeling uncomfortable traveling, enjoying their summer, and right. So we know that. Sorry, I'm just gonna move this. Yeah. Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Rabbi.
1 second. Do you mind putting yourself on mute first? Okay. All right. So here we go. We're gonna jump into this. So as an intro to this. Yeah. No, 1 second. That's my volume. There we go. Okay, I got it. Okay. So as an intro to what we're going to be seeing here is the words of the Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov tells us that every single Jew experiences 42 travels in their lifetime. So why do we experience 42 travels in our lifetime? Because the Jewish people had 42 travels in the desert from the time that they left Egypt up until the time that they reached the land of Israel, which is actually described as Yericho, not crossing the Jordan River, but actually called Yericho, right? Jericho. Interestingly, that was like the touchdown point of the Jewish people. So it started off Egypt and it went to Jericho, and in the middle we have 42 travels, and each of them has a different name. There's a different amount of time that we were in that place, right? And the Baal Shem Tov says that just like the Jewish people traveled in the desert for those 42 travels, right, in 40 years, so too each person has his and her personal journeys in life. But not only that, the Baal Shem Tov says that actually we have 42 journeys every single day. Right? So we have a life, we have a journey as a people, we have a journey in our lifetime, and then we have our personal daily journal, right, of what's going on. So the Alter Rebbe, this week's Parsha deals a lot with these journeys and what they're all about. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a section of this, and I think they're supposed to give you copies of this section in the Alter Rebbe. So we start off just again as another intro to this. So the Torah says like this: these are the journeys of the Jewish people as they left Egypt through the hands of Moshe and Aaron, right? And then it says that Ele Vayichtov Moshe, and Moshe wrote down Motzeim leMaseihem. He wrote down what's Motzah? Motzah is their route, like where they left from, their departure points, leMaseihem, in accordance to their journeys. And then it says, the Torah says, and these are their journeys according to their places of destinations. So it sounds like it's the same thing, but we know the Torah doesn't just mince with words. So it starts off that Moshe wrote down their journeys to their travels, and these are their travels according to their journeys. So what's that subtlety that we're gonna look into that? We're gonna discuss that as well. So let's take a look at the words of the Alter Rebbe. You guys should have copies in a couple of minutes. So to understand the concept of the journeys in the Midbar. So it says like this: Hine Amru Azal, our rabbis of blessed memory tell us that Atida Eretz Yisrael titpashet al kol haolam kulo, that the land of Israel is going to spread throughout the entire world. The holiness of the land of Israel is not just going to be in the land of Israel once Mashiach comes. It's actually going to spread throughout the world, and Jerusalem is actually going to take on the holiness of Jerusalem and take on the whole land of Israel, right? So there's going to be an elevation in the entire existence. So mechuvan mizeh sheyeh kol haolam kulo az b'madrigat Eretz Yisrael de'achshav. That the meaning of this is that when Mashiach comes, that the whole world is going to be the land of Israel as it is right now, right? And once again, the land of Israel is going to bump up a notch. It's going to be Jerusalem. ואז יהיה ארץ ישראל במדרגת ירושלים, דעכשיו וזהו שאמרו שירושלים תתפשט על כל ארץ ישראל כולו. ונמצא ירושלים לעתיד לבוא, יהיה עוד במה. So what's Jerusalem going to be like? Right? So if the land of Israel is going to be Jerusalem, so what is Jerusalem going to be? כי לעתיד לבוא יהיה עליות העולמות. So it says that the land, that Jerusalem is actually going to be beyond what we could even imagine what Jerusalem could be. And he doesn't even categorize that because it's not something that we could even fathom, because there's going to be aliyot ad ein sof. There's going to be just levels of ascent, right? No pun intended. Up until ad ein sof. So this is explained according to what the Arizal says. Where's the Arizal from? From Tzvat, right? And Arizal says, "B'malat Eretz Yisrael da'achshav al chutz la'aretz." So what is the advantage right now of the land of Israel over chutz la'aretz, over outside of the land of Israel, right? What's the difference? New York, Paris, right? Madrid, right? And Tzvat. What's the difference really? V'hu mipnei shesham yored hashpa mimalchut de'atzilut al yedei hitlabshut rabot hainu malchut de'atzilut mitlabeshet b'malchut de'bria yitzir v'eser. So he says like that the difference between the land of Israel and outside of the land is that the land of Israel has less of a condensation of life force, of energy coming from the source, right? So we have the source, which is God himself. And then, according to Kabbalah, there's four worlds. There's like a metamorphosis of four worlds going down to this physical world, right? And so the concept is that the land of Israel receives not from the lowest world, but it receives from the third world, which is called the world of Yetzirah. So there's therefore, when somebody comes to the land of Israel, they feel much more of a connection in the land of Israel more than outside of the land, because we're privy, put it this way, to that third world, which is called the world of Yetzirah, whereas outside of the land, we're in Asiya, and it's a lower existence over there, right? So there's therefore less consciousness, less of spiritual consciousness outside the land of Israel. So he explains that therefore, outside of the land of Israel, there's all types of concepts of tum'ah, of impurity, right? So, for example, if somebody leaves the land of Israel, they have to be worried about what's going on outside of the land of Israel. And there's all types of laws that the Mishnah speaks about, and the Rambam. Why is that? Because the lowest world, which is the world of Asiya, is something which obscures, which hides existence. And actually, in the words of Shir HaShirim, the words of King Solomon, he writes in the Song of Songs, he compares this world to in Hebrew it's called Ginat Egoz. What's Ginat Egoz? It's a garden of walnuts. You think, a garden is flowers, lilies, right? Roses, but a garden of walnuts. So what's that analogy about? Because a walnut, there's nothing more of an opaque type of a fruit, right? Than a walnut, right? So this world is compared to a walnut, right? Because of the condensation, because of, right, the energy, the life force is not seen. So let's fast forward. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. Basically, the travels of the Jewish people in the desert were, what were they about? They weren't in the land of Israel, which represents spiritual revelation, right, from the world of Yetzirah. They represent the stages of getting to the land of Israel, meaning it's outside of the land of Israel. It's a desert. So by definition, what is a desert? A desert is something which has no life force to it, right? It's something which is, nothing grows, right? So it represents the ultimate level of obscurity, the ultimate level of hiddenness, right? Of condensation of life force, which is why it's there's snakes and scorpions and all types of disgusting, all types of dangerous animals that are in the desert. So the Alter Rebbe explains that the whole concept of traveling through the desert, with what traveled with the Jewish people in the desert, what went in front of them? The cloud, but what else? Fire, right? But what else? What does it say? How did the Jewish people even travel? Vayhi bin Aaron, Vayomer Moshe Kuma Hashem Vayafutzu Oivecha Ve'anusu Misanecha Mipanecha. Right? The Aaron, right? The Ark of the Covenant started traveling first, right? And there were three methods how the Jewish people knew to travel. One method was the clouds just rose. Another one, Moshe got this Ruach HaKodesh that, pick up time, like we're going, and then there was the trumpets of the Nisi'im, of the leaders of the tribes. So all three of these levels, all three of these signs were signs, indications that the Jewish people had to start to travel. So the traveling, so it says actually when they started to travel, all like snakes and scorpions, the Midrash says, were killed, right? And mountains that were very high up were kind of like leveled, and they traveled in class, right, in the desert. So the traveling in the desert was really a spiritual journey, and the spiritual journey of this traveling was the Ark of Covenant, which is what was inside of this Ark of Covenant, the Luchot, which represents the ultimate connection of God and the Jewish people, and God and the world, and taking that into this world, into a world of scorpions, a world of an existence, a dangerous existence, represented a fixing of the other side, of the side of tum'ah, the side of unholiness, of uncleanliness, right? And in the words of Kabbalah, it's called the Gimel Klipos Hatmeos, the 3 unholy husks. That's what they're called, and it's a reference to a dream that Yechezkel had. Not a dream; it was actually like a prophecy that Ezekiel had, and he sees three levels of like darkness in front of him, and the first one was translucent, and in the words of Kabbalah, it's called Klipas Noga, which is translucent shell that could be uplifted, and it, right, depending on how a person uses it. And then he saw 3 dimensions. Like one of them was like clouds, and the other ones were like a dirt, like sand thrown at him, and other ones were like rocks, like pretty scary prophecy. But that represents the 3 unholy husks. That is the domain of the other side. So the ark traveled in the desert to uplift the existence of the other side, right? So let's understand this. Is there really another side? Like in Judaism? Other side besides godliness, besides holiness.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Is it, right? We have Hamas,
Yeah.
right, today.
It's all for the good. So
yeah, but it's the opposite of like just happy spiritual stuff.
Right. So we could have like a class on this for a week, which for at least. I mean, I also teach in a seminary, and we've had a class on this for like 2 months, literally, to understand this. But just very briefly, okay, Judaism is different than other religions, primarily the Eastern religions, which have something which is called the yin yang, right? Which yin yang is like a little bit of white within the black, and a little bit of black within the white, and there's a mixture. That means that there's 2 dimensions, right? In Judaism, that's called idolatry. That's called avodah zarah. We're not supposed to believe in that. Why? And we say this every day. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Right? That's our motto.
Supposed to mix physical and spiritual.
Yeah, one second. So our motto is unity of godliness. In other words, so we're not supposed to think that anything else exists besides God, even the negativity, even right, the forces, negative forces don't have any power on their own, right? So now, how do the forces exist, and why do they exist, right? So they exist because of a level of condensations of godliness, right? Which is, in the words of the Zohar and also Tanya, it's called the Sitra Achra. It's called the other side. And it's called the Sitra as the face, the other face. The Sitra Achra, the other face. And it's explained like this. And I think this is what was his name? That guy said very nicely before. Yeah. It says, what is the closest relationship that a person could have with somebody? When they're face to face. When they're face to face. Panim bepanim. It says that actually that's how God gave us the Torah. Panim bepanim. And we say that in Sekibe or Panecha, with the light of your face, of your countenance, you give to us, right? So you could have a person that's here and a person that's in Australia. Yeah. That are having a face-to-face, a heart-to-heart conversation. And they're close, right? But on the other hand, you could have a person that is in the same exact room that's giving you the cold shoulder, right? And the back of their, right, their back. So there's nothing further than that. They're in the same proximity, but they're the furthest thing in the world from each other, right? Because of that, right? That relationship. So the Sitra Achra is called the other side because of a level of condensation. And it's not that God wants to give to them, but it's explained like this. It's explained that there's a midrash that explains this amazingly. And it's an amazing way of looking at it. That a king once invited ministers and good friends to a wedding of his son or daughter, and everybody comes along, and of course, what kind of foods are served? The best foods, and everybody's enjoying themselves. But as we know, in a banquet hall, you have so much leftovers, right? So who's eating in the kitchen? You know, the cooks and the waiters and whatnot, and then the cleanup crew is also eating, right? And then afterwards, a lot of stuff still gets thrown out. So it gets thrown out, and in the dumpster, who's having a feast in the dumpster? The dogs, right? The cats, right? So let's think about it. Hey, they weren't invited. Only the ministers and the friends were invited. How come everybody else is having a good time and enjoying this like fine food, right? So the Midrash explains that is an analogy for the other side. In other words, there's the bestowal of godliness, and there's the bestowal of light, of goodness, right? Of positive energy, positive, right? Kedusha, holiness, and which is aimed at those who were invited, which is specifically, the Jewish people and the righteous Gentiles, right? And etc. that receive from this light. But what happens when it's not consumed? So either the Jewish people or the righteous Gentiles don't do what they're supposed to do. They don't receive that, so then it goes to the garbage. And who does get it? The dogs and the cats. And that's an analogy to the other side, then receiving life force. So they get a life force not because God wants them to get that life force. It's because we did not make a fine enough vessel for that life force, and therefore it goes to the wrong destination. So in effect, that is the desert, and that is what the Jewish people were doing in the desert. They were in the desert in order to transform that life force of the scorpions and the snakes, which are the lowest beings, right? And the desert, again, the lowest place in existence, and to transform it through 42 journeys. So what is the concept of 42? Okay, so why 42, why not 48? Or not, why not 49? Where do we know 49 from? The Sfirat HaOmer. Why not 49? So we have 7 times 6. Why isn't it 7 times 7? Right? So what we should know is there's a prayer that is said every day. It's in the Siddur. It's called the Ana B'Koach. I don't know how many of you heard it. Right? The Ana B'Koach is actually a beautiful song that was made. Ana B'Koach. It's beautiful. But it's, who it was written by? It was written by Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, who was one of the first Tanaim, and he wrote a very important Kabbalistic work called the Bahir, the Book of the Bahir, which is one of the most important books that came before the Zohar. And the Ana B'Koach has 42 letters to it, right? And there's 6, right? It's divided by 6. So there's 6 Rashi Tevot, the 6 letter acronym for the Ana B'Koach. So it would be Ana B'Koach, there would be Aleph, Bet, Gdulat, Gimel, Yemincha, Yud, Tatir, Taf, and then Tzadik. And actually you're supposed to visualize it. There's an idea to visualize the Ana B'Koach. So why is it there's 6 acronym, has 6 letters, right? And there are 7 lines to them, right? Altogether we have 42. So it represents the 7 days of the week. So Sunday would be the first line of the Ana B'Koach, Monday would be the second line of the Ana B'Koach, and there's an idea to actually pay attention to the acronym of it. So spiritually that has an effect upon us, whether we understand it or not. That was such a good breeze. So why is it not 49? Why is it 42? So what is the difference between 49 and 42 besides that missing 7, right? So there's two directions. There's direction of above to below and below to above. The Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, represents a fixing of above to below. And the reason why there's a fixing of above to below is because we say Hayom Yom. We take a day and we, in effect, we're saying today is the first day of the Omer, and we're like zapping it with spiritual energy, and we're saying we're going to use this day to the max, to what I was born to do on this day, not to waste this day, right? To do the most I can in this day, right? Because I'm never going to get it back ever again, never going to get this hour again, never going to get this moment again, and I want to use it to the max. So that's what the Sfirat HaOmer is about. So I'm taking each day and I'm counting 49 days. So 49 days are a fixing of the Sfirot, which you actually see in back of you over there, right? We have the 7 Sfirot, and they start off with Chesed, kindness, Gevura, discipline, or severity, Tiferet, harmony, Netzach, right? There's fortitude, endurance, right? Ahod, humility, Yesod, bonding. And then we have Malchut. So Malchut is actually kind of like the glue, which takes it downwards. Now, why is Malchut? Because we have 6 Sfirot, Malchut is the 7th, right? Please ask me if anybody has a question or I'm not clear, okay?
There's more there.
There's more there, right? And they're called intellectual, right? We have the 3 intellectual, and the Keter over there is the subconscious, right? And we have the intellectual, which actually give birth to the emotion, right? Because why do we act the way we act? Because the way we understand. A kid, you can't blame a kid for, acting immature because he's not fully developed, that he could understand that, that he shouldn't throw spaghetti at his brother, right? So when he understands it, then you could expect it from him. I'm just saying that because I think I had that today in my house. God bless him. So we have the 6 Sfirot, and then it's brought down to Malchut. And what's Malchut? Malchut is kingship, and which is another word for practicality, for actuality. So we're taking it down and we bring it into this world. So it's the fixing of this world, right? That's what the Sfirat HaOmer is all about. It's taking the emotional attributes, which is what we're really made of, right? And we infuse it with the intellectual, we infuse it with the spiritual, and we bring it down into the concrete, right? So that is what Sfirat HaOmer is all about. What are the 42 journeys about now? Okay, so 42 journeys are minus the Malchut, the sphere of Malchut, right? There's no kingship there, which means there's a level of ascent, right? Of going up, right? You guys would think you're here like by coincidence. Nothing's coincidence. So the journeys are all about ascending order. That's what they're about, right? Which means that there's a calling from above to raise oneself up higher, as opposed to raising oneself, raising one's consciousness in order to bring it down. There's a raising up of the consciousness, right, which is a different direction. There's 2 directions. There's above to below and below to above, right? There's water and there's fire, right? And the 42 journeys represent the direction of below to above. So what is being uplifted? What is being called at from below to above, right? So there's a calling. And what is the calling? The calling is the root of our being. The root of our soul is being infused and is being called. So the root of the soul is so why is this like very interesting? It said there's a very interesting Mishnah that says that there's a bat kol every day. That you know what a bat kol is a heavenly voice that comes down from paradise every day. There's all types of bat kols, as heavenly voices. So the question is, like, who heard a bat kol? Who heard a heavenly voice? If you're hearing a bat kol, you probably should see somebody, take something for that. What? Or maybe stop doing what you're doing, right? Yeah, right. So the question is, like, what's the bat call all about? Why is God sending down voices that are not being heard? And the answer is that they really are being heard. But where are they being heard? They're being heard in the deepest recesses of our neshama, of our souls, not in our conscious, like, outer level, but in the deepest part of our souls is where we're hearing the bat calls, right? You've been hearing them? In Tzfat especially. What's that?
Yeah, Tzfat brings it out. Like you're supposed to say that. Okay, continue.
So, yeah, and it's just beginning. After Shabbos, you start, like,
you see the voice too.
Yeah, you see the voice. And you start saying to your friends, "Did you hear that?" And then you're really in Tzfat. Ellie, does that happen to you? All the time. Yeah. She has an angel, Tzfat angel.
The angel-like voice.
Yeah. So what's the point of these voices if they're not really heard? And the answer is that they are heard. They're heard in on the soul root, on the soul level, right? And on the soul level, it's something which is called mazel, right? You know what the soul is called? It's called, why do we say mazel tov? Like, mazel tov, what does that mean? Good luck. What's the, right? If I asked you, what is the definition of mazel? You say luck, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean luck. It's a very poor translation of luck. Mazel comes from the root word of nazal, yizal, which means to drip. So what is mazel? What does luck have to do with dripping? Like, what? What does that have to do with dripping? So the answer is that our soul, right, is connected to a place which is a reservoir, right? It's a reservoir of life, right? That's why it's compared to a mayan. It's compared to a source of living waters, right? And right, but in our soul root, what do we really how privy are we to our soul root all the time, or not? But what do we get sometimes? We get drips, and we're in drips. We get like little like insights, and like we get premonitions and understandings. And the Gemara actually says that women have it more than men, and that they have a bina yetera, that they have more of that premonition because they have more of that, right? Men are more like the cerebral and like, no, I'm gonna just do it like that. And right, women, it says that they understand exactly, who a guest is and who this person is. They have this intuition which comes from this place called mazel. So why do we say mazel tov? So what, right? We say mazel tov because when a person, let's say, gets married, something which is auspicious, right? It's unbelievable. It's like, right? So what do we say? We say mazel tov, that there should be that dripping. That dripping should like continue to drip down on you for forever. There should be like a good, right? And that this marriage over here should be something which is rooted in that goodness of both of your soul roots, and it should continue. So that's what mazel means. So when we're talking about the journeys of the Jewish people, there's the journey which is connected to the origin, right? Remember we said at the beginning, we said that that these are their journeys based on their origins, or these are their origins to their journeys. And then it says these are their journeys based on their origins. So this represents the soul root becoming inspired and wanting to aspire to go higher. to a higher dimension, right? Because if a person isn't inspired to do something, are they ever going to want to do it? They're not, right? Which is why, how do we say will in Hebrew? Ratzon. And ratzon is the same letters as tzino. Tzino means like a conduit, like a pipe. So if a person has, when there's a will, there's a way, right? So the ratzon, when you have the ratzon, so then you'll be able to actually bring it down. You have that conduit that will allow you, that help facilitate you to do what you need to do. So the 42 journeys represent that connection, or from above to below, in order to take the people through. Now, why did we need that? Right? So let's think about it. If the Jewish people would have just traveled in the desert without being carried through in the desert, they wouldn't have been able to do that, right? So it was the Aron, it was the Ark, and it was that inspiration from above that allowed them to continue, right? To allow them to neutralize the forces of the other side. So, which brings us to the Jordan Yericho. So, what does Yericho mean? You know, before Yericho, there's Mitzrayim. What does Mitzrayim mean? Mitzrayim comes from the root of Meitzarim. Meitzarim are what? Restrictions, right? So they represent restrictions, and represents a smallness of consciousness. And if you take it back to us, to the person, not just to the physical journeys, but it represents when a person is at the beginning of their spiritual work, their spiritual endeavors that they start. We start off with a constriction of mind, right? A smallness of mind. That's Mitzrayim. And where was the first place that they went to? They went from there. They went to Ramses, right? And what was Ramses? Ramses is Egypt, right? And it represented that a jump, right? A jump of consciousness into Ramses, which is where the pyramids were, and they went past the pyramids, right? And each name of those journeys represented a different dimension. For example, I'll just give you an example. There was a place that they reached which was called Dofka. That was a name. Dofka in Hebrew means litfok, means to knock, right? And it represents, Dofka means to knock, because their hearts were what do you call it? Were knocking, not knocking. In Hebrew, you say dofek lev. You want to say somebody's pulse is pounding, right? So in Hebrew, you say dofek lev. You take the pounding of your heart, right? So it's called that place. Why is it called Dofka? Because their hearts were pounding. Why were their hearts pounding? Because all of a sudden they realized they had no more matzah. Where they're gonna have food from? There's nowhere to buy things. They had a lot of money, but nowhere to buy anything, and they were in the desert. What's going on? So they started their heart started to pound, and Hashem said, "No problems. I'll give you the man." And Hashem rained down the man upon them. He said, "You don't have to worry," right? So there's journeys in our life, which is quite often like that place of dafka. Okay, where am I going to get, the money to be able to do that? Where am I going to be able to do the, pay the bills, pay the mortgage, etc. Right? And what went on in dafka is a fixing, an eternal fixing for what the Jewish people are going to go through in that level of worries, of parnasah, of sustenance. It's another place, for example, which is called Risma, or Ritma. Ritma comes from the word Rotem. What is Rotem? It's actually a Hebrew name, which means what? Sorry? No, that's Rotem. Close. Rote means a wood. I forgot what kind of wood it is. It's a type of like a shrub which actually is very, very interesting. It makes the best coals. So Ritma means actually coals. It's a place of coals. Why? Because they spoke lashon hara. They spoke slanderous talk. They slandered against Moshe and against God. So that place is called Risma. So why slander, right? Compared to coals, right? Because it's what?
It was black.
Okay, so slander is like blackens somebody, right?
Black is someone's name, right?
Black, exactly. Right? Yeah, very good. But Risma over here, he said the Midrash says that it stays warm inside. It's still hot even after a while. If you touch, it's still hot on the inside, which is what, if you say lashon hara, if you say some negative to somebody, so they'll say, I forgot about it. But once they see that person, it's still deep down inside. Oh, you remember what that person told you, and it's you're keeping it, and that's what lashon hara is. And then we reach, right, each one of these travels have their specific names, have their specific fixings, right? And at the end we reach Yericho. And what does Yericho mean? Jericho means smell. Yericho, yeah, right? Midbar Yericho. And smell is, now what's so special about smell? So smell is the only sense that was not tainted by the sin of Adam and Eve. Right? All the other senses were tainted. It says that Eve saw, and they heard, and they touched, right? And they tasted, of course. But smell, it doesn't say that they smell, which is why, by the way, on Masei Shabbat, we actually smell the besamim, because we want to go back to paradise, and the sense of smell is something which is always paradise, right? Which is why smell is so interesting, that you could smell something and remember. Yeah. Brings you right back to like years. You're like, oh yeah, 1973, I was in, my grandma's carpet, right? You remember that?
I remember that.
You remember that?
Good time. No, but I know what you're saying.
Right? Or somebody's smell actually brings you back to like different, or brings you away. You want to stay away, right? So Yericho is something which is messianic. It's actually the Mashiach, it says, is going to judge people with the sense of smell. Haricho beyirat Elokim. He's actually going to smell. He's actually going to be able to smell somebody. I see, like, guilty.
No way.
Innocent, right? Because the sense of smell is associated with purity. Like the Gemara says that one of the Amoraim, one of the rabbis, was able to smell something very, from very far away. So his rabbi told him, "My son, there's something like very pure about you. That you're able to smell it." Right, and that's the idea of actually mikvah, of actually, immersing somebody immersing in the mikvah. There's the sense of like it's a place of purity which is associated with smell, right?
So what does it mean if someone loses their sense of smell?
How do they lose their sense of smell?
Some people can't see, so some people can't smell. Yeah.
Not born with a sense of smell? Really?
You could lose it, or it's true. Yeah, like there's someone who can't smell when there's a skunk, and yeah.
I don't know.
Does that have anything to do with like spiritual purity?
What? I'm sorry?
Yeah, but like, what does that mean about them?
You can't start good.
Yeah. Well, I know. I have a good friend that's colorblind, and I don't know. It definitely means something, and it's because you get so much from smell, and it's like food, right? Food, drinks, exactly. Food.
Some people who were in.
Oh, but you could smell.
Like very scared that maybe when they went to Hashem, they said like I ran out of my eyes and I said, let's watch my Torah, but I didn't have eyes, so we have to do reincarnated.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't know. You're right. Yeah. So Mashiach is going to judge by smell, and it's associated. So Mashiach is the sense of smell, right? Which represents the highest level of awe of Hashem. Not it's called Yirat Hashem, which is loosely fear of God, but it's really awe of Hashem, which represents a level of something which is beyond the person, what the person could sense and understand with intellect, and with feeling. It's something that it goes beyond that, and it's something that you sense, right? And you almost like spell it, and that's what it represents. So we're starting from Egypt, and we're going all the way to this highest fixing, the fixing of getting to this level of smell, right? Of Yericho, of Mashiach, essentially, right? So once again, going back to these psukim, going back to these verses, and these are, Moshe wrote down their sources according to their travels, right? Which represents this starts over here, the sources, based on their travels. So what is the main thing is the travel. So it's very interesting. A person doesn't really, when a person is in a travel, they don't understand why they're there, or they don't appreciate that travel, right? They say wisdom, is hindsight is 20/20, right? Because when you're in the situation, I don't know, if it doesn't feel so comfortable, I want to be out of this situation, right? So we don't appreciate that place that we're in, which is really for our good, because God would not put us in a situation unless it was part of our journeys, 42 journeys. So if we're in that situation, we need to know that it's for our good. But human nature, and right, is not to appreciate the step, right, the journey of it, but to appreciate the end of it, right, or going through it, which is why it brings us over here to these words, Motzaim leMaseim and Masaeim leMotzaeim. So Moshe writes down, Moshe is the leader of the Jewish people, and he is preoccupied with basically starting over here with Motzaeim, with their sources and their journeys. They have to get to their journeys and get to the end, right? But then the Torah says that these are their journeys based on their sources. In other words, the difference is that the journeys are also part of the end goal. So each step in each journey is a journey which is an end in and of itself. Not just the end is the end, which is how it's first written. Moshe writes it down from, these are their origins and these are their journeys. So the journeys are just to get us to the end of the origin. But it's written, these are their journeys based on their origins. In other words, that even the journeys themselves are the origins, are the source. In other words, I'm going out. Today's a new journey. So it's a new going out. It's something which is independent of what occurred yesterday and what my previous journey was all about. So anyways, I want to end off with a story. Any comments, questions?
The 42 is the add-up of all the trips and the places where they stayed.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's also in there already.
Sorry?
It's also in there because the number 42 is mentioned, right?
Yeah, that
you only get there if you also count the staying in a place.
Exactly. That is your stage. But that's exactly what the Torah is saying, that these are their journeys based on their origins. In other words, that the individual journey is also something which is from the origin itself, which is it's very, very deep. I mean, to somebody that's able to keep that in mind is somebody I feel that is a very enlightened, right? And somebody that is a very connected person, somebody that's a very wise person, and somebody that's able to actually appreciate each stage that they're in for the stage that they're in. So, right, in each step, and it's really like that. As babies, we start off with each step is like a milestone. But when we get to be adults, each step is whatever, right? And it's not like that. It should be that each step and each place that I'm traveling to, each place that I'm going to is exciting. And it's like, there's like newness to it, right? It's not connected to what happened before, which is, again, what the Torah says. These are their journeys based on their origins. In other words, right now is a brand new journey. So forget what happened last journey. Forget about if I was, disappointed, or it was a great journey. Now it's a new journey, and I have to do something new, and I have to start again. And I can't rest on my laurels if it was a good journey, and I can't be dejected if it was a negative journey. I have to start this one over and take it as it is. So there's a story about Rabbi Mendel of Vitebsk, who was one of the students of the Maggid of Mezrich. It was the Rebbe, actually, of the Alter Rebbe after the Maggid passed away. And he made Aliyah to the land of Israel, and he's buried in Tiberias. He's buried in Tveria. Many people go to his resting place. It's very holy tzaddik that made Aliyah. He wrote a book called Pri Haaretz, the fruit of the land. So in the 1700s, he actually first settled in Tzfat, which is interesting. He first came to Tzfat, but there's people say that he had to leave Tzfat because he couldn't sleep because of all the angels.
Really?
Angels kept him up. Which is what I was saying. Ellie,
we're not gonna sleep tonight. You're saying?
That's what they say. He had to leave. He had to leave Tzfat. It was just too, too much flapping of the wings. It was like, he needed to go to Tveria. So, and that's where he's buried. So when he was 10 years old, he was known as an Ilui. Ilui is like a genius of Talmud and learning, etc. And he went along with his rabbi to see the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov said, "Oh, who's this young man?" And they told him that's Mendel, right? And he was with two of the older Hasidim of the Baal Shem Tov. One was Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Poloni, and the other one was I think the Maggid of Mezrich. And he was a student of the Maggid at the time, even though he was so young. So anyway, so the Baal Shem Tov says, takes out his pipe. Baal Shem Tov actually used to smoke a pipe. And he said, "Come, I want to tell you a story." And he told him a story. And he says, once upon a time, there was a boy named Mendel. And he was born to these parents. And he basically told him where he was born and what happened when he was 5, what happened when he was 10. And he went through his whole life. So he told him his whole life story, what's going to happen to him, where he's going to be. He's 10 years old. Told him his what's going to happen to him, right? And he leaves. So years later, he decides to go to the land of Israel, and he stops by Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Apoloni, who was there at the time, and he was so happy to see him. "Oh, Mendel, I remember I was there when the Baal Shem Tov told you the story, and I remember that in the story there's a reference to you coming to see me before you go to the land of Israel." So Reb Mendel was like, "Yeah, that's right. I was supposed to see you." And if I'm not mistaken, that Rabbi Yaakov Yosef said that there's also something that says you're supposed to take your a coat or something. And he traveled on, and he had many hardships on the way, but throughout the way he said, "I'm not scared because I know the Baal Shem Tov said to me that I'm going to be in the land of Israel, so therefore I'm not scared. Nothing's going to happen to me." And he got to Israel. He went through hardships. He knew what the hardships were going to be, and just one more point, when he was before he left, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef asked him which part of the story you on. So he said about half of it was already finished. So I like this story because it's like, everybody wants to know their future, what's going to be, and all that, right? For some reason, this tzaddik, Rabbi Mendel Vitebsk, the Baal Shem Tov, knew that he needed to know these journeys. But why I think it's so interesting is that all of us have those journeys, and all of us, there's a certain destination, right, and destiny that we have. But yet we have those steps. We have each and every step is a travel in and of itself. It's not something which is independent. Whether we know what's going to happen, basically we choose what's going to happen, because we do have free choice, right? Even though there is that destiny, but we do have the free choice, and the Rambam speaks about that, how it's a contradiction. How could that be? But we have the free choice to make the step right now that we're in the utmost, right? The greatest that it could be. And if it's comfortable or it's not comfortable, as a Jewish people, I think right now it's, for us up north, we don't feel it that much, but for our brethren living in the Negev, right? I saw something on one of the news channels that the evacuated Gush Katif people that used to live there, they were put in caravans. They don't have shelters. They live in like they have to run to a shelter. One of those, I don't even know what they are. They're like construction, like big round construction, like beams or something. And that's where they run to. And they have 30 seconds maybe to run to those shelters. And it just, what happens if it's the middle of the night? They have to sleep there. Little kids, but it's a stage, right? And it's a stage that we're going to go through, that we're going through. We're going to, we are succeeding, and we're going to prevail in both individually and also as a people. So God bless, and I want to just say that this lesson should be this l'schus, the chayalim, l'schus, all the soldiers and all those that are injured, that they should have the utmost success and be strong and complete the job, be safe, and each of them should come back safely without any injuries. So God bless.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Stopping tonight.
Pleasure.
Hello?
Nozel. Sorry, Steve, 1 second. Sorry?
No, I wanted to ask a question. I don't know when, because I don't know when to ask. I have 2 questions that I wanted to ask. Can you listen?
Yeah, that's Baruch. Yeah, I'm listening.
So is it the same concept?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.